Hello guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you all are doing good. I'm Aman Jeti. I have been working in the project management since last 8 to 9 years. I welcome you all to the PMP exam preparation module 1. I hope you will love this session and we'll definitely continue with the further modules. So quickly moving on to the agenda of today's discussion. Firstly, we'll learn about the two terms PMI and PMP, though the two terms do not need any introduction, but still we'll have a quick look on them. We'll further discuss about what is a project, different organizational structures, and the project lifecycle. So talking about Project Management Institute, what we call as PMI, it was established in 1969 and is headquartered outside Philadelphia in USA. PMI is the leading non-profit professional membership association for the project management professionals. So total PMI members at present are around 5 lakhs and total PMP holders in the world around 8 lakhs. Regarding the PMP exam, so the PMP exam is not an easy thing to crack. It's a wondrous task. It tests your patience, it tests your analytical skills, your knowledge, and if we look at the PMP exam, it is a 4-hour long exam with 200 multiple choice questions. You do not have any scheduled break, but yes, you can take the break at your own convenience, but your clock will keep on running. Usually you see 6 different types of questions in the PMP exam, which are formula based, situational, knowledge based, interpretational, specific technique, and ethics. The formula based questions are usually straightforward questions. You have to simply apply the formula and calculate the results. The situational questions are a bit tricky. They can be lengthy, and they are basically there to test your ability to apply your theoretical know-how into your real project management situations. The knowledge-based questions, they require you to identify the meaning of the situation based on your understanding of the facts provided. So basically in these types of questions, certain kinds of factual things will be provided to you, and it will test your knowledge that what inference you make out of those facts. Interpretational questions, they test your ability to deduce a condition or a situation or a final inference from the description of the status of the problem or the problem. Specific technique, it will provide you a snapshot of the situation, for example a network diagram, and will ask you to provide an element that's inherent in that diagram. For example, they'll give you a network diagram and they may ask you to calculate the float of a particular activity. And lastly, you will find few questions on the ethics, which are based on the PMI Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. So there are 5 different process groups as defined in PMBOK, that is Project Management Body of Knowledge. These are initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. So all these process groups have different share of the questions in the exam. And the most important thing about the PMP exam is that there is no negative marking. So you should try not to leave any question unanswered. So let's start with what is a project. So never expect in the PMP exam that they'll directly ask you what is a project, but you may come across a situation where you need to conclude on a situation whether it is a project or not. So to understand what is a project, we need to understand the two terms One is operational work and the second one is project work. So operational work is basically a continuous work which we need to perform to support our business. On the other hand, a project is temporary and it creates a unique output. So the two important terms in the project is temporary and unique. A project is temporary. How? Because it has a defined beginning and end in time, and therefore it has defined scope and resources. Secondly, a project is unique because it is not a routine operation. It has a specific set of operations designed to accomplish a singular goal. So what is a project management then? Project management is application of knowledge, skills, tools and techniques to project activities to meet the project requirements. So PMI breaks project management into process groups and knowledge areas. The 5 process groups, as we already discussed, are as follows: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. In the 10 knowledge areas that are there, that are described by PMI are integration, scope, time, cost, quality, procurement, human resources, communications, risk management, and stakeholder management. So we will keep on learning these process groups and about these 10 knowledge areas throughout our training session, throughout our different modules. So apart from project management, there are two other important terms which are program management and portfolio management. So first we'll talk about what is a program. In short, a program is a group of related projects. For example, there is any ABC company which is coming up with a program of township, right? They want to build a new township. So in the township, they may have further different projects of low cost housing projects. They may have a project of, to build commercial offices. They may have a project of, build apartments, different apartments. So these can be the 3 different kinds of projects which can be included in a program of building a township. So a program is a group of related projects. A project may or may not be part of a program, but a program will always have projects. Program management focuses on project interdependencies and helps to determine the optimal approach of managing them. And secondly, portfolio management. So what is a portfolio? A portfolio includes a group of programs and individual projects. For example, there is another ABC company which has has come up with a portfolio to increase the effectiveness of the IT in their company. So in that portfolio, they may have different business objectives. For example, to make IT more efficient, to reduce the inventory costs, to increase the user satisfaction, or to release a new brand of clothing, right? So a portfolio includes a group of programs and individual projects that are implemented to achieve a specific business goal. For example, as I mentioned, a specific business goal to increase the effectiveness of the IT. The programs and projects in the portfolio may not be interdependent or directly related. For example, to reduce projects to reduce inventory costs are not dependent on the projects to launch a new brand of clothing. Portfolio management refers to a centralized management of one or more portfolios to achieve strategic business objectives. So in short, if we see a snapshot of the project, program and portfolio, a project gives you a unique benefit. A program is a group of related projects or shared benefits. Portfolio achieve a specific business objective, right? So a project can have a single project, program can have project 1, project 2, up to so on project 10, and portfolio can have project 1 to project n and then program 1 to program n. So moving ahead, who is a project manager? In simple terms, I would say project manager is a person who is responsible for everything in the project, right? Because he is a person who is assigned by the performing organization to lead the team that is responsible for achieving the project objectives. As per the PMI, project managers are organized, passionate, goal-oriented, who understand what projects have in common and their strategic role in how organizations succeed, learn, and change. And if you see Wikipedia, according to them, a project manager is a person who is responsible for accomplishing the overall project objectives. Project Management Office. The Project Management Office centralizes and standardizes the project governance processes. PMO can play three different roles. It depends upon the organization. They can be supportive, directive, or controlling. In the supportive role, they have a very low level of control, which provides only the policies, templates, methodologies, best practices, etc. In the directive role, they have a moderate level control, which provides support and guidance, gives training to the team, assists with specific tools, and ensures that everything according to the project management office is complied by the project team. In the controlling, they have the high level of control in the project. They directly manages the project, provides project managers, and takes control of the projects by directly managing them. Another important influence on the projects is how the company is organized, because the organizational structure will dictate who the project manager goes to for help with the resources, how the communications will be handled when the project is going on, and it also influences many other aspects of the project management. You need to be very cautious while answering the situational based questions when it involves organizational structure, because you need to analyze in the situation that is dictated in the question that which type of organizational structure is being talked about. The first organizational structure is functional. In the functional structure, the organization is grouped by areas of specialization with different functional areas. This is a very common form of organization. Such organizations are grouped by areas of specialization within different functional areas. For example, you can have engineering, accounting, marketing, manufacturing, etc. So in this functional organization, team members, apart from doing their routine work, they have to do an additional work of the project. So information required from other departments will be routed through departmental heads. Each department will do its work independently of the other departments. Team members complete project work in addition to the departmental work. So another form of organizational structure is a matrix. So matrix organizations can be further divided into weak matrix, balanced or strong matrix, which all depends on the relative level of power and influence shared between the project managers and the functional managers. Weak matrix can organizations, they are more or less like a functional organization and they maintain most of their characteristics to the functional organization, and the role of the project manager is more of a project coordinator or an expediter. So when a project manager plays the role of an expediter, it means he acts or works like a staff assistant or communications coordinator. Expediter cannot personally take or enforce any decisions, but when a project manager acts as a project coordinator, it means he has some power to take and enforce decisions, he has some authority, and he reports to the high level manager. In balanced metrics organization, the need of a project manager is recognized, but It also does not provide project manager with the full authority to take decisions regarding the projects and the project funding. So here the power is shared between both the functional and the project manager, and team member reports to the project manager as well as the functional manager. A strong metrics organization is more or less like a projectized organization. It has many characteristics of the projectized organization. It has a full-time project manager with considerable authority over the project decisions and the project funding. It also has full-time project administrative staff. So, whenever you see metrics in an exam, you should think of two bosses. As you can see in all the three diagrams of weak, balanced, and strong metrics, the functional team members play role both in the project as well as their departmental works. So whenever you read a term metrics in an exam, you always think of two bosses. The team members, they report to two bosses, the project manager and the functional manager. Communication goes from team members to both the bosses, and team members do project work in addition to normal departmental work. So entirely opposite to the functional organizations is a projectized organization where the entire company is organized by the projects, and the project managers have a great deal of independence and authority. They have a great deal of control over the projects. All the team members are often co-located. Team members, they are assigned and they do report to the project managers. So one thing is there that is in the projectors organization is that team members, when they complete one project, they do not have any department to return back, right? So the team members, they need to be assigned to another project whenever they complete one project in a projectized organization. So as far as the communication is concerned, communication primarily occurs within the project team members and the different project managers. So many organizations involve all these structures at various levels and are often referred to as composite organization. For example, a fundamentally functional organization. An organization is a functional organization, but they may create a special project team to handle a critical project. So such a team may have many of the characteristics of a project team in a project that is there in a projectized organization. Also, this organization may manage most of its project in a strong metrics, but allow small projects to be managed by a functional departments. So, composite organizations have uh, all the structures at various levels according to their need. So here's a snapshot, or you can say a summary of the different organizational structures with respect to the project manager's control and authority. And if you see a functional organization, project manager has little control over the budget, over the project resources, and also the project managers play a part-time role. And if you see a metrics organization, the role of the project manager increases from the weak metrics to the strong metrics. And if you see a projectized organization, uh, project manager has almost total authority over the project and its resources. Project manager manages the project budget, and project manager plays a full-time role in a projectized organization. Another important term which we're going to discuss is a project life cycle. Now, a project life cycle is a series of phases that a project passes through from its initiation to its closure. Now, a project can have a single phase, a project can have a multiple phases. Mostly, the different phases of the projects are sequential. Project life cycle can adopt a predictive or plan-driven approach or an adaptive or change-driven approach, which we'll discuss later. Now, if you see the figure to your left, it is a very generic project life cycle, right? You start the project, you organize and prepare the project, you carry out the work which you call execution, and finally you close the project. Now, with these sequential activities, you prepare your project charter, you prepare your project management plan at the end of the planning stage, and at the end of the execution stage, you have your accepted deliverables, and then at the end of the closing of the project, you have your archived project documents, and which we mostly term as lessons learned. Right now, you can see that most of the projects, they vary in sizes and complexities, but all these projects, they can be mapped into this generic life cycle structure, be whether a project is of a single phase or multiple phases, but all the projects can be mapped into this generic life cycle structure. Now, another important thing, if you notice in this project, is that in this life cycle, is that the cost and the staffing levels, they are very low at the start. They attain their peak when the work is being carried out, that is, when the project is being executed, and they drop rapidly as the project closure, near to its closure, right? So, one more important thing is that you should not confuse this project life cycle with the different project management process groups, right? Because uh, if you see that the processes in the process group, they consist of the activities that may be performed and recur within each phase of a project, as well as for the project as a whole. So you should the project management process groups should not be confused with the project life cycle, right? So another thing to notice is that the risk and uncertainties and the cost of making changes. So as the project progresses, the risk and uncertainties, you see, they are greatest at the start of the project, and it decreases as you near your project closure, right? So on the other hand, if you see the cost of making changes and correcting errors, they increase substantially as the project approaches its completion. So it's always better to plan your project as accurate as possible, because if you make the changes at the later stages of the project, it is going to cost you more. So some projects have clear objectives and goals, while others and results are uncertain. So each type of project has its own set of management challenges. So what do? We implement different project methodologies based on the different project conditions. So the known projects can usually rely on a predictive method of planning. Predictive planning provides a very linear, specific development plan structured around producing a predetermined end result within a specific time frame, right? On the other hand, evolving projects that face continuous changes are best suited for adaptive planning. Adaptive planning involves breaking a project into small components over an undetermined timeline to allow flexibility in directing the course of the project. So the projects which follows the predictive planning, they mostly follow the waterfall method, and the projects which follow the adaptive planning, they mostly follow the agile methods, right? So if you see in comparison, the the projects which follow the predictive plans are fully plan driven. The scope, time, and cost required are determined as early as possible, practically possible in the project cycle. The parameters of the project are unlikely to change. The project development process is thoroughly documented, and the project objectives are clearly defined, right? But on the other hand, if you see the adaptive or the agile methodology, adaptive methods are adopted when dealing with rapidly changing environment, when scope is difficult to define in advance, when projects are completed in stages, right, with a series of deliverables rather than a single final product. When parameters of the project are evolving, means the project is always evolving. You never know what is going to happen in next 6 months. You can only fix your milestone that this particular milestone will be achieved in 6 months, but how, you don't know. When the timeline is flexible, so the adaptive methodology is only possible when your timeline is flexible, as it offers you flexibility in planning your project. Now, there are few more parameters which influence the course of our project management, and one of those parameters is organizational process assets. Now, see, project managers have to often deal with the existing processes
the procedures and historical informations. So all these things are called organizational process assets, and I beg your pardon, and they are inputs to the majority of the processes in all the project management process groups. So they provide direction and guidance in planning and help the project benefit from the past company experiences. So basically, if we talk about OPAs, they are existing plans, processes, policies, procedures, and knowledge bases in the organization. They also includes lessons learned, historical information, completed schedules, risk data, etc. But if we look at the specific examples of OPAs, they can be, guidelines and criteria in in an organization, specific standards and policies like human resources policies, health and safety policies, ethics policies, project management policies. It can also include some procedures like, project audits, process audits, checklists. They can be templates. They can be change control procedures, financial control procedures, effect issue and defect management procedures, etc. So all these things, uh, are called organizational process assets, and they are one of the important parameters, and they are inputs to mostly in all the project management process groups. Another thing is enterprise environmental factors. They basically refer to the company culture and existing system, which are not under the control of project team that influence, constrain, or direct the project. So basically, enterprise environmental factors they are considered inputs to most planning processes. They may enhance or constrain project management options and may have a positive or negative influence on the outcome, right? So, few examples are like organizational culture, structure, geographic distribution of your resources or facilities, government or industry standards, infrastructure, existing human resources available with you, personal administration, stakeholders, political climate, organizations, established communication channels, commercial databases, etc. All these things are existing in your organization, and project management does not have any control on them. He has to deal with and plan his projects accordingly. Now, anything that limits your options is a constraint. Example, a date by which the project should be completed or maximum allowable risk a project can have. So, few examples of constraints are time, cost, scope, quality, resources, risks, right? But all these constraints are prioritized. Management sets the priority of each constraint, and you, as a project manager, use this prioritization throughout the project to properly plan your project. You have to evaluate the impact of changes and prove successful throughout the project completion, right? So it is also important to realize that you need to evaluate the effect a change to one constraint has on the other constraints. For example, if you are shortening your schedule, it can have a negative impact on your cost or a risk. So you need to evaluate that if you are making changes in one constraint, how it is going to affect your other constraints, keeping in mind the priority of the constraints, right? Stakeholders, the most important people that guides the success of your project. So, who do you think are your stakeholders? Stakeholders are basically the people or organizations whose interests may be positively or negatively impacted by the project or its final product. They can be internal or external to the organization, right? So for example, your internal stakeholders are your team members, your internal customers, your sponsors, portfolio managers, program managers, etc. And external stakeholders, they can be, your government regulators, consultants, end users, customers, banks, financial institutions, etc., etc. So people or groups who exert a positive or negative influence over the project but would not otherwise be considered part of the project are also considered as stakeholders, right? So the most important thing for the success of the project is that always consider your stakeholders like your assistant team members. Why? Because anyone or any organization or any group who is impacted positively or negatively by the outcome of your project or your project activities need to be informed regularly, just like you inform your team members regularly, right? So consider your stakeholders like your assistant team members. So next comes the discussion about project management processes. So as we've already discussed that whenever you enter a new phase or you start a project, there are basically 5 project management processes. They are initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and finally closing. So as it is clearly shown in the diagram, when you enter a project, right, you start with the initiating processes, then you come to your planning processes where you plan your process, then comes the executing processes where you do the project activities according to your project management plan. But when you do your project activities and while you are executing your projects, there are a lot of changes that are generated. So when these changes are generated, you again need to go back to your planning processes, make changes in your project management plan, and accordingly then execute your processes again till this cycle goes on till you achieve your final accepted deliverables, and after that you close your process. So throughout throughout this cycle, one thing that is common is there is monitoring and controlling processes. So throughout the cycle of the project of the project, you continuously monitor and control your processes. So briefly, we'll discuss what do we do in all these project management processes. So firstly, we'll discuss about initiating. In initiating, you formally start a project and officially authorize it, right? You identify and analyze your stakeholders, and you do the high level planning of the project. So in initiating, you basically do the high level analysis, you identify the high level risks, you make your assumptions, you identify your high level constraints, you identify your stakeholders while you are in the initiating process. And initiating process formally start a project and formally authorize who is going to be your project manager. Next comes the planning. In planning, you establish the scope of project and define the objectives and course of action. So the final outcome of the planning is you develop your project management plan and project documents. You know? Then comes the executing part. In executing, basically execution is basically doing the project activities in accordance to your project management plan. So you complete the work as defined in the project plan. You basically focus on managing people, following processes, and communicating according to the plan. Next comes the monitoring and controlling process, where you track, review, and regulate the progress and performance throughout the project. Controlling changes and recommending corrective and preventive actions is the most important function of the monitoring and controlling process. And you need to ensure that only the approved changes are implemented. So finally comes the closing phase, where you finalize all the activities across all the process groups to formally complete the project or a phase. You also establishes the premature closure of the project. If a project is being closed prematurely, then also it needs to be closed properly. All the project doc all the project activities need to be properly documented. all the project phases, all the project process groups need to be formally complete, even if a project is prematurely closed. Now, throughout the life cycle of the project, a significant amount of data and information is collected, analyzed, transformed, and distributed in various formats to the project team members and all other stakeholders, right? So, project data are collected as a result of various executing processes and shared within the team members, right? So, the collected data are analyzed in context and aggregated and transformed to become a project information during various controlling processes. So the three type of project informations that we're going to talk about is, first one is the work performance data. So all these terms are defined in the project management body of knowledge. The first one is work performance data. The work performance data is basically there are observations and measurements that are identified through the various execution processes. It is basically the data that we collect during our execution process. For example, percentage completion, start and finish dates, number of change requests, actual costs, actual durations, etc. So next is the work performance information. The performance data collected from various controlling processes, analyzed and integrated, right? Examples includes the status of the deliverables, implementation status of change requests, and forecasted estimates, etc. So there is a relation between work performance data and work performance information. Work performance data is basically the observations that we collect, and work performance information is the analyzed outcome of the work performance data, right? Now you in work performance data, you know your percentage completion, you know dots, you know your actual start and finish dates and your actual costs, right? So in work performance information, you re-estimate those, right? You forecast your estimates. So this is basically a work performance information. So next comes the work performance reports. Work performance reports is nothing but a physical or electronic representation of work performance information that is compiled in the project documents, right? Examples include status reports, memos, justifications, recommendations, etc. So guys, here's the end of module 1. I hope you all enjoyed the session. If you have any queries, kindly do mention them in the comment section. I would also be very grateful to you if you give your feedback, be it positive or negative. So see you soon guys in the next module as soon as possible. Bye bye and take care.